This is from a piece called The World's Greatest Fungo Hitter in my book, Not Even Immortality Lasts Forever. Stella Yelton McClanahan, my paternal grandmother, Mom Mac, I called her, lived to be 92 years old. By the time I came along in 1932, she was already, by prevailing standards, getting up in years. And as I was growing up, I always thought of her as a very old lady. Yet, although I was to know her throughout the last 35 years or so of her life and the first 35 of mine, she never really seemed to grow the least bit older, an illusion nurtured in part by her meek but steadfast refusal to tell anyone how old she was. Age, in her opinion, was strictly a private matter. She'd no more have disclosed her birthday or celebrated it than she'd have stood up in church and announced the current condition of her underwear. I seem to recall that when she died, they'd had to consult a family Bible to determine her age for the death certificate. So, in a sense, she was both aged and ageless, eternally the same affectionate, timorous little soul, fretful yet as cheerful and chipper as a songbird, whose favorite diversion, nonetheless, was going to funerals. The younger members of Mom Mac's family, my half-baked self among them, were inclined to make light of her gloomy but endearing pastime. It seemed, on the one hand, faintly ghoulish, and on the other, absurdly quaint and old-timey. But now that the years have brought me to the point where every day is a whole new adventure in longevity, I like to picture my sweet old granny flitting from funeral to funeral like a lachrymose little butterfly, tenderly dispensing sympathy amongst the mourners as though she were anointing them with her tears, as perhaps indeed she was. Mon Mac lived all but the last few of her 92 years in Bracken County, in a succession of modest houses in Johnsville, Chatham, and Brooksville, always under the same roof as her bachelor brother, my great uncle, Cliff Yelton. Like his sister, Uncle Cliff, Unc, had always seemed to me preternaturally ancient, as though he'd been old right from the get-go and had just stayed that way. Come to think of it, I'm not even sure which sibling was the eldest. They might have been twins for all I knew. Both had sandy hair and both were prone to freckle, except that Mom Mac was old and wispy, whereas Unc was a portly gent, as round and solid as a croquet ball. Still, they complemented each other perfectly in at least one important respect. Mom Mac was a fabulous cook, and Unc had a prodigious appetite. Heavy feeder though he was, Unc had never really done much to earn his keep. My grandfather Claude, a farmer, sometime tobacco speculator, and, I think, Johnsville dry goods merchant, died before my second birthday. And during the earliest years of my childhood, Mom Mac and Unc continued to live on the small family farm in the hills just outside Johnsville. Unc took care of the chickens and gardened a little, and he had probably helped out in the store now and then before the Depression shut it down. But otherwise, as Wendell Berry once said of a fellow we both knew, he always did the minimum. Despite his torpid nature, Unc had possessed in his time a unique athletic talent. He'd been, according to my dad, the world's greatest fungo hitter, or at any rate, Johnsville's greatest fungo hitter. In the ancient game of baseball, see, a fungo hitter is the gent who stands at home plate during pregame practice and hits grounders to the infielders and fly balls to the outfielders. And of course, like any other human activity that requires a modicum of physical dexterity, there's an art to it. A good fungo hitter, no matter how cumbersome and ungainly he may be in other walks of life, performs at the plate with the languid, effortless grace of a well-oiled automaton, tossing the ball up and swatting it in what almost seems a single motion, tirelessly spraying hits hither and yon about the playing field with lazy, masterful precision. Doing it well requires good hand-eye coordination, but very little physical exertion. And Unc, it seemed, was adequately equipped in the former department and naturally gifted in the latter.